Let me say a very good morning now to Mr. Richard Tice. Richard,
very
welcome.
Good morning. Great to be here in this studio.
And here we are in this beautiful new studio. So I'm very pleased to say that this is the new home of the Independent Republic very, very soon.
Absolutely. And so much to talk about. I mean, will 3 hours be enough, Mike?
I'm not sure it will. I mean, first of all, the story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, France stops fewer migrants despite £480 million of aid. And we know it's a lot more than that, actually. But we've been giving these people millions and millions of pounds. What are they doing with it?
Well, the truth is they're banking it.
Yeah.
And they're using it to fund, I suspect, the gendarmerie around much of the whole of France. And supposedly sending a few more of their own sort of gendarmerie officers to the northern coast of France. But we're not seeing the results.
No.
I mean, it's quite extraordinary. So the reality is that it's some 3,000 less people that they have stopped this year than last year. And you just think, well, what are we giving you all this cash for if actually you're just going to bank it and send it somewhere else and not do the job that we'd agreed the deal for?
Well, I was listening to Beckett Hudson this morning on Jeremy Carl's breakfast show, and she said that the French have spent around £3 billion thus far trying to stop the boats. I mean, call me old-fashioned. If you gave me £1 million, I could stop the boats. Yeah. Probably if you gave me £300,000, I could stop the boats. Everybody knows how to stop them.
That is clearly an absolute nonsense. There are plenty of ways to stop them without spending anything like that quantity of money. They just, the reality is they haven't got the will.
They don't want to. Well, also, it doesn't suit them, does it? Politically
speaking. It doesn't
speaking.
suit them because, you know, they've got a problem because, of course, they've got many illegal migrants crossing from Italy into France, and it's acting as a magnet all the way through. So they're, in a sense, they're happy to see people come to the UK. But here's the point. If actually all of the illegal migrants were stopped coming across the channel, it would act as less as a magnet, less people would go into France, and collectively, jointly, we could show and lead the way. But this will not stop until you do what Australia did. A very interesting article in the Telegraph today by Tony Abbott, saying how when he was in charge of the Australian government back in 2013, he stopped the boats by a pushback policy. And yes, the international community sort of rose up in horror, but he stopped the boats.
Well, it's the same as the so-called international community. I said this last week when people talk about the ECHR and whether or not we should leave the ECHR and we should remove ourselves from it. And, of course, all the crazy lefties go, oh, you want to be like Belarus and Russia. You want to be a pariah in the international community. Well, no. I suggested we have a much better thing to do. It's just to just ignore them.
Is Australia a member of the ECHR? Of course not. Is America?
Well, no. But the point is that there are plenty of countries that are members of the ECHR who don't pay any attention to it.
Yes.
You know, you're in it, but you basically go, yeah, that's fine. We're going to do this. Because in Greece already, they're pushing boats back into Turkish waters physically, you know, almost like with tugboats. They're just going bang like that, off you go, and they go into Turkish waters. The Turks have to rescue them. Similarly, I don't know if you heard on my show earlier this week, a man rang in, a guy who'd been over in Dunkirk. He was on holiday, and he went down to show the people he was with one of the beaches. You know, it's obviously a very historic area. And what he saw was quite remarkable. He saw a guy pull up in a massive 4x4 truck, with a huge trailer on the back, 3 massive dinghies already inflated, right? They unhooked the trailer, pulled the trailer down to the shore, put the boats in the shallows. Very, very soon thereafter, a double-decker bus pulled up, parked, and migrants got out of the double-decker bus as if they were on some kind of tour where they'd all been picked up by somebody else, and they all went and got into the boats, and the boats all sailed away. Meanwhile, on the...
Any side of the gendarmerie in this process?
Yeah, it gets better. The gendarmerie was sitting in a car watching it all, with their demi-tasses of coffee and smoking gitane and going, there they go.
Obviously on a tea break.
Yeah,
I mean, just
so they don't care. They're not going to stop them.
No,
but clearly what that tells you is that this is a very well-organised human trafficking situation.
And that story is, I suspect, repeated up and down the coastline whenever it is a relatively calm day and the wind is in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop. And I'm determined to try and find... to learn more about it.
So you went out this week.
Yesterday morning.
Intrepid Captain Tice style.
As an intrepid explorer, I left Ramsgate Harbour at 5:35 in the morning with my skipper, and we went out in a 6.5-metre rib, and there's some footage here of us. We went out 10 miles, almost to the midpoint.
It's like the start of Miami Vice. I mean, it's a fast boat you've got there.
It was. Well, it was. So we were doing 20 knots, trying to keep pace with the Border Force Hurricane, which is
that is quick.
Yeah, no, we were motoring on, and that was actually calmer than it was early doors. I have to say, I mean, it's pretty terrifying.
I bet, yeah.
When, you know, because the boat we were in, although it had a bigger engine, it's actually the same length as some of the dinghies that these migrants. And you get out there was a pretty big swell when I was first out there, and I thought, this really, it's pretty scary.
And there's the boat itself.
And that's the boat that I was in.
Without wishing to too much press you for how much you've spent on this particular escapade, did you rent that boat? Is that easy to do?
It's owned by a friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
And he said, let's go and see what we could discover and learn, and that's what we did.
Well, one of the things that we learned this week, Oliver Whitfield-Mirchich was out on the channel this week as well, and he spoke to one of the fishermen, and he said the thing about the channel, which is why it's so dangerous, is that the way that the waves roll actually can chuck people out of boats quite easily.
Yes, and that's what I discovered first thing. I mean, quite often our boat was literally airborne.
Yeah.
And it was pretty hairy. And just the quantity of other boats, the big ferries, the cargo ships.
Yeah.
We were using an app called Vessel Finder, and there's just dozens and dozens of boats. And
well, I think
it is pretty hairy.
There's another 500 came yesterday. We've already had a couple of days in the past week where 700 or more have come, which, of course, in one day is more than enough to fill the Bibby Stockholm.
That's right. So we think that border force boat that we were following there, the Hurricane, we think that had migrants on board. They were heading back. We followed it back to Dover Harbour, and they were going back at pace, and you could see from tracking them, they'd left the harbour at pace. They'd circled, we think, picking people up for about half an hour at around, give or take, 7-ish, and then headed straight back to port, and we followed them back. And they were probably not thrilled to see us. But it's important to understand how this process works.
Yeah,
and
because it's a daily business, and again, that's what the fisherman's captain said. It's a daily business. It's going on every day, day after day after day after day after day. More and more people coming, hundreds and hundreds, and it's never going to stop.
And day after day, the French gendarmerie are not doing the job that we have paid and contributed for them to do.
Yeah,
and. What they could do actually is be down there on the beach. They could stab. They could literally deflate the inflatable with one cut to it, and that would stop it. But they won't do it. They haven't. They do not have the intent, the will. And they're happy to wave them off.
And the traffickers know this. The traffickers know that they can't be stopped, and they also know that as soon as they get these people of theirs that they're trafficking onto border force boats, they're basically in the country. They're in Britain as soon as they get on that boat.
But we have to do what Australia did. We have to pick up safely out of the dinghies, put them into the border force boats, and take them back to Dunkirk and Calais. And this will stop in a fortnight. It'll be game over. The moment the people smugglers realise that no one, and I mean no one, is going to cross into English waters, this stops, and the migrants will stop paying the vile people smugglers.
Yeah.
And the thing is, all these do-gooders, they've all got blood on their hands, Mike, because as we saw tragically last weekend, people died because this carries on, and it's got to stop.
It's got to stop, because I don't understand anyone who supports the thing carrying on, because you're basically supporting crime, you're supporting death, you're supporting criminal trafficking. And I don't understand anyone, whether it's an MP, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's some kind of charity. Incredible that they could think that this is a good idea. Let's talk as well about this exclusive story you've got for us concerning hotels, where these people end up once they get off the boat.
So as we know, hotels are being essentially sort of commandeered by the Home Office all over the country. And it turns out one this week called Harborne House in Newport Pagnell, just to the north of Milton Keynes, has been taken over. It's about 160 rooms for over 200 migrants. But the story here is utterly unbelievable, where the owner of the hotel is a convicted criminal who was given a jail sentence of some 16 months. And he was convicted for perverting the course of justice, offences under the Proceeds of Crime Act, in relation to, listen to this, get this, illegal houses of multiple occupation.
Right.
And there he is, and now he's being paid a huge government contract for this hotel that he's just recently bought.
Right.
So he basically bought a hotel in order to let it to the government, taking huge sums, even though he's a former convicted criminal for illegal houses of multiple occupation.
Isn't there not even some rule about businesses and businessmen that can't run businesses if they've been convicted of crime?
Well, there absolutely should. I mean, he should not be allowed to be a company director.
Surely he's unfit to be in charge of a company, isn't he?
Well, given the nature of what happened and those offences for which he was convicted, and so you've had the leader of the Milton Keynes Council has written to Robert Jenrick saying this is outrageous, this should be stopped. You've had the local Tory MP Ben Everett,
Yeah.
also write and say this is outrageous. We did ask both of them onto this show.
Yeah, I've got a statement from Ben Everett, actually, that I can read to you here. He's the MP for Milton Keynes. I've already raised this directly with the Home Secretary and asked that the use of the site is suspended and a full investigation is conducted after the current cohort of asylum seekers are processed. We need to find out the facts, as the people of Newport Pagnell deserve much better than this. The Home Office did release a statement about the use of hotels, and they said, we have been clear that the use of hotels to house asylum seekers is unacceptable. There are currently more than 51,000 asylum seekers in hotels, costing the UK taxpayer £6 million a day. They say we engage with local authorities as early as possible whenever sites are used for asylum accommodation and work to ensure arrangements are safe for hotel residents and local people. Well, they can say all that. They can say it's unacceptable, but it's their plan.
It's their plan, and how can you say that it's going to be...
I've come up with a plan. I find it completely unacceptable. It's a disgrace. I'm going to take myself into full control.
The idea that the residents...
special measures shortly.
The idea the residents of Newport Pagnell can trust the owner of a hotel who's previously been convicted, actually convicted with a jail sentence, that you could trust him to look after the local residents and apply the appropriate rules and regulations is utterly laughable.
It's obvious that people have seen the golden goose here, haven't they? They've gone, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to shut down this hotel and I'm going to make it available to the government. I'm going to, never mind trying to get weddings and bookings and having fallow periods in September when everyone's gone back to school. I can just book it out fully, sell every single room for the next 2 years to the Home Office, and Bob's your uncle, I can buy myself a new hotel somewhere else.
And so that's exactly what's going on. You've basically got people with ill intent up and down the country now buying up hotels, places of accommodation with a view of letting them to the government. Sometimes they're inflating the prices just before they do a deal with the Home Office. I mean, there's a reason why this is carrying on. And that is because the vested interests on this side of the channel are making way more profits than the people smugglers. And in my view, this is racketeering, and all of these people, they have got their hands dipped in the blood of the migrants who are dying on the English Channel. And I think it's appalling.
It really is. It's become the biggest scandal, I think, in this modern Conservative government's sort of tenure. Over the last 12 years, there have been plenty of things that have gone wrong. There's plenty of things that you'll remember about David Cameron and George Osborne and even the coalition government. But I think this will be forever known, as far as I'm concerned, as the kind of stain on the Conservative government, because they haven't solved it. They could have solved it. We've been telling them, you've been telling them in your dual role as both leader of Reform and also at the Brexit Party and also as a TalkTV host as well. We've been telling them for years that this is a massive issue. And it's only now that the rest of the world and the rest of the media have caught up with us.
But it is stoppable. You've got to use the right international treaties with the right lawyer. Tony Abbott, in his article in the Telegraph today, said he didn't like the legal advice he was getting from his civil servants, so he went out and got a more robust, determined lawyer. That's all you need to do, and then you show some political leadership, some courage. I tell you what, look, I know what to do to stop the boats. If I was Prime Minister, I would do it. If Rishi Sunak had the courage, the cojones to do this, then things could look very different electorally as to the way they might go. But I'm afraid he's too weak. He doesn't believe it. It doesn't trouble him. It doesn't trouble Keir Starmer. It's the British people up and down the country who are paying the price of this.
Exactly right. And they've had enough and they're sick to death of it. And we will be quite happily their messenger on this one, because we know that you care about what happens to this country, and we know that you care about who comes into this country and who lives in this country. And why shouldn't you?